Donald Trump blinked again. Faced with an emergency order from a federal court and a wave of public outrage, the Trump administration caved under pressure and released the full $8 billion in SNAP anti-hunger benefits that millions of struggling Americans had been waiting for. It's a dramatic turn that underscores what happens when the courts, state attorneys general, and public interest lawyers stand up to executive overreach. For days, Trump's team played games with people's lives. They tried to dodge a direct order from Judge McConnell in Rhode Island, who demanded the government fully fund the November SNAP payments without delay. The administration raced to the appellate court, insisting that the judge's order was unconstitutional. But when pressed to show their math, they had no defense. They had the money all along. Inside Washington, officials at the Department of Justice were scrambling. Late-night filings, contradictory briefs, and political spin couldn't disguise the truth. They had funds available and simply didn't want to use them. The judge wasn't fooled. He told them to look at the Child Nutrition Fund, overflowing with unused cash, and make the transfer immediately. By the end of the day, states like Pennsylvania began confirming that SNAP recipients would finally see funds deposited into their accounts. For many families, that meant the difference between an empty refrigerator and a stocked pantry, between another night of hunger and a meal on the table. This entire debacle exposes the core of Trump's governance: politics before people, optics before obligation. It took the persistence of Democratic attorneys general, advocacy groups like Democracy Forward, and a determined judiciary to force the federal government to fulfill its most basic duty: feeding its citizens. Skye Perryman, the founder of Democracy Forward, told USA POLITIC that this wasn't about technicalities, it was about survival. Her team raced into court to stop an administration that was weaponizing bureaucracy against the poor. "The president is playing politics with people's lives," she said. "For weeks they claimed their hands were tied, that they couldn't pay. But the law was clear. They could, and they must." The federal judge agreed, calling the government's delay unlawful and heartless. The administration's excuse, that they could only afford partial payments, a logistical fiction meant to stall the process. The judge saw through it immediately. Find the money. Pay it all. Within hours, the government's bluff collapsed. Meanwhile, state leaders like Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro refused to wait. Shapiro, who sued the Trump administration to restore the benefits, signed an emergency declaration to free up $5 million in state funds to help food banks while the case worked its way through court. Speaking at a press conference, he reminded Americans what was at stake. 1 in every 8 of our neighbors relies on this funding. We couldn't stand by while Washington played politics. His leadership became a model for blue states taking initiative when federal compassion runs dry. The ripple effects were immediate. Community pantries like Philabundance and Feeding Pennsylvania received hundreds of thousands of dollars in emergency support, while citizens donated over $2 million in a matter of days. But as Shapiro emphasized, no state could replace what the federal government had withheld. SNAP provides over $366 million every month in Pennsylvania alone, money that keeps food on the tables of millions. The federal court's intervention wasn't just a legal win, it was a lifeline. Behind the scenes, the fight intensified. 2 separate lawsuits, one from Democratic attorneys general and another from Democracy Forward, representing churches and advocacy groups, boxed the Trump administration into a legal corner. Judge McConnell's restraining order in Rhode Island and Judge Talwani's decision in Massachusetts created a double bind the administration couldn't escape. When Trump's team continued to stall, McConnell issued a blunt rebuke. "You are playing with people's lives." He ordered them to use Section 32 funds, derived from customs receipts, and stop hiding behind red tape. While families waited, the clock ticked toward Friday. For millions of Americans, this wasn't an abstract policy battle. It was a question of whether there would be food in their homes that weekend. Parents were counting pennies, veterans were cutting meals, children were going hungry, and Donald Trump, he was in Miami, attending a business conference, raising money for Trump Inc., and bragging about the booming economy. Later that week, he hosted a lavish Great Gatsby-themed Halloween party at Mar-a-Lago surrounded by billionaires, golden decorations, and champagne, as 16 million children went without food because of his delay. This contrast is the story of Trump's America: opulence at the top, starvation at the bottom. While the president spent taxpayer money on golf trips, luxury renovations, and political rallies, courts had to step in just to make sure hungry Americans could eat. It's a disgrace that it came to this. But in the end, democracy pushed back. By Friday night, the SNAP payments began flowing again. For families living paycheck to paycheck, it wasn't just a policy decision, it was survival. For the Trump administration, it was an embarrassing retreat, a public reminder that even executive power has limits when faced with moral and legal truth. And make no mistake, this fight is far from over. The same administration that tried to block food assistance is now appealing court orders, still arguing that feeding the poor should be optional. But thanks to tireless advocates, state leaders, and an independent judiciary, millions of Americans are eating tonight. Here at USA POLITIC, we'll keep tracking every turn of this unfolding story, not just to document Trump's political miscalculations, but to expose how deeply his decisions affect real lives. Because this isn't just about policy or politics, it's about who we are as a nation. When a president parties in luxury while veterans and children starve, when courts must order compassion, when ordinary Americans have to sue their own government for the right to eat, that tells you everything you need to know about priorities. But it also shows something else. Resistance works. The system still has the power to correct injustice when people demand it loudly enough. And tonight, because they did, millions of Americans can fill their pantries again. Stay tuned to USA POLITIC. Subscribe now, comment below, and share this video so more people understand how political accountability looks in action. Because democracy only survives when we keep watching.